Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome and thank you for attending today's webinar with the Modernization of Standards, Processes, and Procedures Task Force. Purpose of the webinar is to review some key changes that you can expect to see between the draft recommendations and the final recommendations. My name is Kristen Awanechko, NERC's Director of Membership Engagement. I will touch on just a few logistical items before we go ahead and get started. This webinar is being recorded and we will post the recording on the MSPP webpage. And I also want to remind everybody that it is our policy and practice to abide by NERC's antitrust compliance guidelines. And if there are any questions, you can contact our General Counsel, Sonia Hosha. We will be taking questions today with whatever time we have left. We are going to hold questions until the end to make sure that we can get through the content of the presentation. You'll notice that we have both the chat and the Q&A panel available. We ask that you use the chat to just communicate with the host around any logistical or AV issues, and use the Q&A to submit any questions you may have. If you are not seeing it on your screen, there are three little dots on the bottom. There should be three little dots on the bottom right of your WebEx panel, just next to the chat button, and that should get you over to the Q&A panel. Feel free to enter questions throughout the webinar today. We will be monitoring them, and we'll make sure to get questions in the queue for when we get to that point in the session. So with that, I will go ahead and just turn it over to Greg Ford, Chair of the MSPP Task Force. Go ahead, Greg.
All right, thank you, Kristen. Welcome, everybody. This is a chance for the task force to give you an update on where we are. Todd Lucas, the vice chair of the task force, is going to join me. And what we plan to do is just go over some of the main items that we as a task force, after hearing the responses and hearing the feedback from industry, have gotten together. And we have worked on revising those recommendations based on that feedback. And just want to make sure everybody knows the ink is not dry on these recommendations. We're still in the process of formulating those and getting them ready to submit out to you all as formal recommendations. But we want to at least give you an idea of where we are headed with a lot of those items. So if we'll go into that next slide, we'll just kind of set the stage. Just want to give you an idea of the feedback on the draft recommendations. We'll then go through a summary of the key changes around that, and then hit on some next steps that we have. And as I said, Todd and I are going to be walking through this, and look forward to comments afterwards, but we'll take those questions as Kristen said. So let's just get right into it. Go to the next slide. So you all know we submitted our draft recommendations, just under 70 responses. You can see the numbers there. We heard from just about all sectors of the NERC membership. Trades and forums submitted responses as well. And of course, as we've done all through this, trying to be completely transparent, all of those comments and responses are publicly available. 203 participants overall at the forums that we had. Those were earlier this month here in December, and just glad that everybody was there. I think those were in November, and the panel and the group actually met in December to listen to those responses, the feedback that we've gotten. We spent 2 days diligently going through all of the comments, and I hope as we go through these changes, you see that we have been responsive and we have listened to the comments that were made to us. So thank you all. Thank you for the 1,400 attendees that have participated and given feedback throughout this whole process. So thank you all very much. Let's go to that next slide. And you can see here are the areas, the primary areas that we will get into today. We certainly heard comments around the risk subcommittee. You know, what about this standard initiation term sheet, stakeholder panel, straw polls, the structure of the ballot body itself, the attestation, fast track, and metrics. So we're going to hit on each of these topics and show you at least an indication of where we're headed with the changes in the recommendations. And I should have said in the beginning, the task force members are also on this call. If any questions come up, please, task force members, if you have a comment, please chime in and we will do that. But I can't thank the whole task force enough. A lot of effort, a lot of open collaboration has really gone into this, as well as the NERC staff. I can't thank them enough. So with that, why don't we get into these changes that we're talking about. And if we'll go to that next slide, we'll get started.
So, hey, everybody, this is Todd Lucas, sound check. Kristen, can you give me a thumbs up that y'all can hear me? Okay, great. Greg and I, this is Todd Lucas. Thanks for all y'all participating today. Greg and I are going to tag team here a little bit on these next several slides. So on the subcommittee, so generally speaking, the comments were favorable around some form of stakeholder committee having oversight for a majority, if not all, of this process. Our previous paper suggested that should be a risk subcommittee, RISC risk subcommittee, and we got some mixed feedback on that. We got a fair number of questions about who would be on that subcommittee, how would the members be selected, and really seeking some clarity on how that would work. So we have spent some time back in early December. We spent a fair amount of time talking about that, and what you'll see in the recommendations that will be coming out here relatively soon. What we're suggesting now is still reporting to the risk. There is some logic behind that. Some of the feedback we got was maybe we ought to report that stakeholder group to the MRC. One of the things that I learned, and several of us learned through this process, is that the MRC is technically does not report to the Board of Trustees. It's an advisory group, and so the governance is a bit different with the MRC. So that's one of the reasons we're still recommending this report to the RISC. It also really does align with their charter in terms of identifying risk and mitigation, and this is just kind of an extension of that. So the membership seemed to be even more important to most of the industry based on the feedback. And so what we're proposing now is a hybrid model that would have 15 members. We heard the industry say, I want to be able to select my sector representative in that group. And so you'll see 11 sector elected representatives show up in there. And then we'll make out the rest of the 15 where there would be some appointments really come from the RISC. So 4 seats that would be filled at the discretion of the RISC. And we're proposing that would also include the chair and the vice chair of this group, and then two at-large. That could be someone that is actually a sitting RISC member, or it could be someone that the RISC membership selects to represent them. And then other specifics around term limits and membership kind of credentials. We feel like that'll be addressed in the charter that's yet to be developed for this group as we move forward. So I think that's the high level changes you'll see for that stakeholder group. Let's go on to slide 6.
All right, in slide 6, and I failed to mention this, and please allow me. I apologize for me not having my camera on. The bandwidth is not really that well where I'm at, so I'm trying to maximize that and making sure at least the audible works. So I do apologize to y'all for not being on camera, and it's going to go back and forth between Todd with Todd's pretty face, but mine is going to stay hidden from you. So that's a good thing for y'all. So if we keep going on with our ideas here, on the standard initiation requests and the term sheet, general support for the proposal to accept this new idea of a standard initiation request during semi-biannual submission periods. There's some concern around volume of requests and how urgent or emerging risks outside of these periods would be addressed, and suggestions for the comment periods around that term sheet. So if we look at our recommendations, the standard initiation request submissions certainly be accepted on a rolling basis throughout the year. We'll have deadlines to be considered for some of the workshops. NERC would ensure submissions meet minimum requirements for those that are to be posted publicly. All term sheets, once we get to that point, all term sheets would be posted for informal comment periods. And along with that will be an accompanying straw poll. The risk subcommittee is not necessarily would not be required to respond in writing to these comments from the term sheet perspective, but they will be there for their use and their ability to know if we've got the term sheet in the right place to move it on to balloting. So with that, the subcommittee may decide to obtain additional feedback via other means. That could be a technical conference, maybe another set of comments after some adjustments or some adjustments are made. But the intent is to give that subcommittee some flexibility to obtain those comments once they believe the term sheet is at a solid point to move on into the development phase. But if the comments indicate that they're not, they have that flexibility to have a technical conference or make adjustments to the term sheet and redo comments if they would like. So you'll see those type of word changes in the recommendations as we move forward. So let's go to the next slide.
So the stakeholder SME pool, and y'all can see we have switched gears here, and we've gone from panel to pool, and that's been on purpose. I think when we use the term panel, we may have created a little bit of confusion around our intent, and pool is probably a more appropriate term. So our proposal has been to develop this pool of experts that would be the pool that we would go to help develop these standards that get into the process through the initiation stuff that Greg has just talked about. So we got some questions around, what is that pool composition? What is the nomination process? How do we ensure we've got broad expertise? And then really to really along with that, clarify, who's going to engage on project standards teams and makeup. So we are talking about a large pool of SMEs. There's you could think 75 plus. And they will be pre-vetted SMEs. There's really no limit on the number. We're not anticipating any term limits. And the pool would cover the full range of expertise that we need across the whole body of standards, so that we would have people really ready to go as the need comes up for particular expertise, whether it be emergency operations or transmission planning or whatever the technical area is. We're intending this to be an open process for joining the pool. So think in terms of an open time period where people can self-nominate or be nominated. And then it would be, we're anticipating, just like we do today, NERC staff, as we're standing up a drafting team in today's world, NERC performs a function of verifying and approving the people that qualify to participate there. And we expect that to be the same process for verifying that people have the right skill sets and where they fit in this whole SME pool. But then all of that would be subject to this new risk subcommittee oversight. And then when it comes down to, hey, we need some SMEs to come help develop a particular standard, then similar to today, you'd get a recommended slate based on who's in the pool from NERC staff, but then the risk subcommittee ultimately has the decision on who would be engaged from the SME pool. One of the things that has been raised as well has been that we might get SME burnout, or we may have someone that is volunteering or wants to volunteer, but then when the time comes that we need them, something has changed or something is going on that they cannot participate. And we recognize that that is an issue. And so just by virtue of being in the pool does not mean that you can't say no when the time comes. And that's why we're trying to do a large number of people in the pool, so that in Utopia, at least, we'll have enough people that can participate that we're not having to go and shake the bushes and find more SMEs. And then finally, another question we've gotten about the meetings. So these meetings that will be held in the standards development part of the process, all of those will be open to observers, and observers can participate just like they do today in the standards drafting process. And you can be just as influential as one of the official members in a lot of regards by participating as an observer. So let's move on to slide 8. Hey, Grandpa, are you there?
I forgot the mute button. Sorry about that. I knew I couldn't make it through a whole presentation without the mute button getting me. So, looking at this straw poll idea, stakeholders supported the use of straw polls, certainly in conjunction with the comment periods, with requested, what many of the stakeholders requested that we clarify some things in the straw poll. And a lot of ideas around, well, what constitutes or what indicates that something will go through to a ballot based on straw poll information. So let me just get over into and I also hit on some of this, some of the criteria for coming in for balloting. But let's get over to the right side of this and look at some of the recommendations. So absolutely, straw polls will be conducted anytime there's a comment period. That's kind of the basis of all of this. Is as we do a comment period, let's have a straw poll to say where are we in the development of this standard development phase. You must submit comments to participate in the straw poll. And as you'll see here in a little bit, it can be a very simple, I agree, I disagree, with in the comment period. Of course, if you disagree or if you don't think it's a good one, we want you to have some viable comments to give the development folks an indication as to which way they need to go. But these straw polls in general really are data points. They're not driving any decision to go to a ballot. They're data points to give the risk subcommittee and the drafting team indications on whether or not a draft is ready to move to ballot. So that's the way we want to keep it. We do recommend that as we get into the implementation phase, that we have some people look at this and write out some good guidance on how we interpret the results or the data points that come in from the straw polls. So we do need to have a good guidance paper, and we plan to do that. Now, one of the questions that we got was, and I got this one certainly while I was up at NPCC, and the question was, hey, some of us can't really get to a point where we can offer up some good comments, but we want to use our trade organizations, and we're supporting our trades to submit comments on our behalf. And if you were up there at that one, I said, yes, we plan to do that. Well, logistically and operationally, it wasn't going to work out the way I had envisioned it up there. We still think we've got a tool that's going to help and allow it. So from an operational and logistics standpoint, trades can offer their comments, and we welcome their comments. But rather than listing all of the people that might be on that, in order to get the ballot period or the ballot body filled the way we need to, we actually need for each organization to submit a comment ballot and the straw poll. And what we're recommending is, and I'm going to use NRECA since that's my trade as an example. NRECA will submit comments on behalf of the cooperative sector. If I agree with all of those comments, I simply have to just get on, open up the comment tool, and I can just submit a comment that says, I agree with NRECA comments. Then I'm in the ballot body pool. My comments will be accepted, and they will be linked to the NRECA comments. So we don't feel like that should be that big of a burden. It allows the smaller entities to use their trade organizations to put their comments together. It links them to those comments, and then it allows them to be in the ballot pool once we get to that phase of the structure. You only need to submit one set of comments. That puts you in the ballot pool. There could be 4 or 5 iterations of the comment period, but as long as you submit one, you're in the ballot body pool, and we'll get into, you'll see all of that in the recommendations. So as I just look at I think I hit on all of those bullet points. So let's move on to the
So registered ballot body, certainly some of the changes in the segment and in that process was in our last proposal, really trying to refine the composition, and intent was to improve, and balance interest and address some issues with access in the current process. And that included consolidation of some of the segments. And a lot of the feedback we got was some concern around some of those recommendations to consolidate some of the segments. So after a good bit of discussion back in early December, we decided to leave segments 3 and 4, so the LSEs and the TDUs, to leave those segments as separate segments. The original proposal combined those two into one segment. And essentially, that's the biggest change in the registered ballot body recommendations that we had. The rest we're retaining, for the most part, the rest of the draft recommendations that you saw in the last proposal. One thing we are adding is a recommendation that NERC really go back and look at the ballot body and the segment structure 2 years down the road after implementation, and see if there's anything new in the regulatory framework, anything that has really become more enlightening as we've gone through the implementation of these new processes, and maybe something like a marked increase in end user participation, following some outreach. So you'll see, other than the segment 3 and 4 change, the recommendations that you'll see coming out you should be familiar with what was in the last proposal, and then that addition to do a revisit a couple of years down the road. Let's go to slide 10.
Okay, attestation. So, as we look at this, we had some, what I'll call, general support for the idea of this attestation. But as we got together and we started looking at putting all this together, the task force has now come to the point where we've determined not to recommend any new attestation or certification requirement for registered ballot body members representing your corporate entities. We have a process up front. We've decided to leave it like it is. And so you'll see any of the recommendations around attestation coming out of our recommendations. We feel like if this really becomes an issue, we can address it later. Plus, with our metrics that we're wanting to put in, we kind of think a lot of that will be really unnecessary. And we'll, again, just using the process that we currently have and not make it any more cumbersome than it needs to be. So that one was pretty easy one to address. And with that, let's move on to the next one.
So the fast track part of this process, I think it's generally been an accepted thought that there would be, we at least need to have a part of the process that allows for something to go on a fast track and not be bound by the timelines that we're putting in place for this more structured standard initiation request evaluation that gets the process started. So some of the feedback we got was, so what qualifies to get into the fast track? And generally speaking, although I will say this, if we do this process right, we really expect fast track items to be minimized. However, we know reality will kick in and there will be something come along. And so what you'll see in the recommendation will be that FERC and NERC board directives be eligible for fast track. And then there's some discretion offered to the risk subcommittee. So unless otherwise determined by the risk subcommittee, we really anticipate fast track to be a limited use, assuming we've gotten a lot of the other pieces right in the normal standard process. And then there was some comments that raised concerns about comment periods that are possibly being too constrained. Our intent is to target 30 days where practical, but we are leaving some flexibility in the process to shorten those as needed or as warranted, depending on the magnitude of what's out there for comments. Let's go to slide 12.
Okay, so stakeholder feedback, we had a lot around, hey, can we develop meaningful performance metrics for the new process to track efficiencies, identify improvements, capture lessons learned as this new process gets implemented. So the MSPP task force certainly identified some areas of metrics for potential use to assess the effectiveness of these recommendations and standard development process. And you can see many of those here on this slide. It captures most of the potential metrics that we're looking at. The main thing to notice here is that we focused a lot of this around time element based metrics. How long is it taking to get from one step to another? That's kind of helping with the efficiency part of it. But you also see, and where we plan to go, is metrics around the quality of the drafts, the quality of the workshops, maybe. You know, if a standard is taking 4 or 5 drafts to get through, then we've got to really start looking at the quality of how we're putting that together. Maybe the term sheet needs to be looked at a little differently, and we can go back in through the process and modify and make those improvement areas. The intent here is create the capturing process of these metrics so that we can verify the efficiency and the quality, and we can offer up opportunities for review and changes as we move forward down the line. As you all know, it's always difficult to recommend changes if you don't have the metrics there. So we want to start this metric capturing process at the very beginning. And as we move forward, we believe those metrics will prove very, very beneficial in the overall scheme of this effort. So why don't we move into the next steps? Next slide.
Yeah, so where do we go next? So December 18th, we're here doing the webinar, identifying a lot of the key changes in the draft. Drafting of the recommendations is underway right now while we're concurrently still talking about a few of the details. But as y'all know, there's some holidays coming up, and that may slow us down a little bit, but we do have drafting underway right now. January 22nd is probably the next kind of public milestone of we'll be presenting at the MRC informational session. And then shortly after that, we plan on final recommendations being posted for a comment period. I'm going to talk about that for just a minute, or in just a minute, but our intent is to post no later than January 26th, the recommendations. If we can get them ready earlier, we will certainly post them then. So that's the words posted on or before January 26th. one thing that I want to make sure is clear about the comment period that we're opening up. As a task force, we are winding down on and trying to hone in on the recommendations that are going to go to the board. The comment, so the final recommendations are firming up right now, and the comment period is really intended to provide industry feedback to the board for their February 12th review when we present the final recommendations to the board for their acceptance. We want to have an opportunity for the board to hear directly from industry on what does the industry think about this recommendation that the task force has laid in front of them, and so that they've got full visibility of what the recommendations are and what industry's perspective is on those recommendations. So I think this is just continuing on with trying to maintain as transparent a process as we can, that everybody kind of sees people's positions as we move forward in the recommendations. And then beyond whatever board action is taken on February 12th, then there is some form of implementation that happens after that. A lot of that depending on what does the board direct to happen next in terms of implementation. But some of those key dates to keep in mind: January 26th, January 22nd, and February 12th. And I think that wraps us up. Greg, I think we're ready for the kind of Q&A part of the discussion here.
Yeah, we can certainly answer as many questions as we can. And Kristen, I will turn it over to you to kind of moderate that for us.
Sure, happy to. Thank you, Greg and Todd. So again, feel free to enter any questions in the Q&A. Also, feel free to raise your hand. We'll keep an eye on that as well, and unmute you when it's your turn. We've got a few questions coming in on the chat. The first one, and I did provide a reply that I think everyone's able to see, but I know it's a question that we've received fairly often. So just quickly, I'll touch on the question was whether NERC membership sectors are the same or different from the registered ballot, from what we have in the registered ballot body with segments. And so I just want to make clear that, oh, I'm sorry. So I just want to make clear, so membership sectors, which Todd referenced with respect to the risk subcommittee, is different from registered ballot body segments, which I talked about as far as the registered ballot body goes. Those membership sectors are defined in the NERC bylaws, and an individual or corporate family can be a member of just one sector. But if you go to the NERC bylaws, and I provided a link in response to that Q&A, the sectors and their definitions are defined there. So just wanted to provide that for everybody, because again, it is a common question that we do receive. So the next question, and Todd or Greg, I'll turn to you on this one. If a company or a subject matter expert has a particular interest in being on a project team, would you anticipate there being a way for them to reach out to the risk subcommittee to identify if there's a particular standard that they are interested in?
Greg, I'll take a stab at least at an answer. I think that's a good point. I think maybe as a part of initially getting in the pool, that may be something, if there's like particular set of standards that someone is particularly interested in, maybe that ought to be something we need to think about as people are initially getting in the pool. We just need to think about a formal way to do an outreach as a particular standards effort starts gearing up. I certainly don't think there's any harm. We want people that are interested in engaging, and so we want to facilitate a way for people to engage in the things they have particular interest in. We just need to think about what's the best way to set that up so that there's some formality around it as opposed to just an informal, I know somebody on the subcommittee kind of thing. Somebody else jump in here and save me.
I think you hit it, Todd. You know, we certainly want, and we've been looking around functional SMEs, if you will. And that kind of lines in with particular standards, at least as I'm thinking of them. If you're interested in SIP standards or you're interested in planning standards, those get down into the functional skill sets of folks that we're looking for. And certainly opening up the committee, the SMEs, you know, we're not putting a cap on the number. We're not doing anything like that, but the implementation part of this is going to be where we really define how we capture that list and how we make sure that those who are interested know exactly how to identify themselves to the risk subcommittee. So I think between those two, hopefully that gets the answer.
And I would like to reiterate something I think I said earlier, that these are going to be open meetings. Observers will be allowed. And my belief in the NERC space, and this has worked for me in the past, is observers can be just as influential in many regards as a official member of one of those project teams. So let's don't forget about the observer opportunity as well. I know there are some other things that come along with being an official member that are important, but the observer can also be influential as well.
Okay, thank you. And I think
we welcome that.
Yeah, I think we've got Sujin Kim from NERC wanting to make a comment as well.
Thank you, Kristen. I just want to also reiterate, as we move forward with the process, one of the things that NERC has said they are very committed to is making sure that this is a process that is collaborative and that everyone can join. Whatever system that we put into place with regards to how we manage this group of individuals, we will ensure that if you have a particular interest, we will make sure that we're able to accommodate all of your input and participation as needed. In the past, sometimes we've struggled for volunteers. Sometimes we've needed to reach out for other individuals. This new process, when it gets implemented, how it gets implemented, one thing we want to make sure that we reach the objective on is ensuring that we bring the technical experts and all the subject matter experts to the table sooner, faster, and they're more readily accessible. And NERC staff will facilitate that.
Thank you, Sujin. So next question, and Todd, I think you talked about the risk subcommittee. For the at-large appointments, can you just clarify, would there be consideration given to ensure that there's maintaining some Canadian and or regional representation on that risk subcommittee?
So I'm glad that came up. I should have mentioned that earlier, that one of the intents of the at-large and one of the considerations that should go into the selection of those at-large is to make sure we're covering the right diversity. So, for example, if you haven't, through the sector elections, picked up a Canadian representative, then we need to be picking that up in the at-large. So that is, thank you for the question, because that is also another intent of the at-large, to make sure we can round out diversity, and that's a consideration in selecting those.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, the next question, you mentioned the informal comment periods on the term sheet. Would there also be any formal comment periods just that would require a team to respond to the comments, or formal comment periods being recommended to be eliminated entirely?
So if I think I understand the question, I'm going to try and maybe restate it. Is the question, we're only going to have the informal, or I think anytime we put out a comment period and we put out a request for comments, that will be done in a formal fashion, and along with it, the straw poll that will be put in at the same time. Informal to me is maybe you've got some questions you want to ask directly to the NERC staff or to the risk committee about a particular thing, and you're now allowing, you know, we certainly take comments in any way, but the formal process is what's got to be the way that you bring in the comments that you really want driving the output of whether it's the term sheet or the drafting standard. You got to come into more of that formal area, but in everything that we do, we always have some form of informal comments. But at the end of the day, you really need to fold those into something formal. Todd, you got a different look on that?
Yeah, I think this question may be getting more towards not as much the designation of formal or informal. It may be more around today. I think what we call a formal comment period requires kind of a written spreadsheet. Here's my response to every comment that I received. And I believe the answer to that question is yes, we are eliminating or we won't have any of those kind of comment periods. Somebody jump in here if I'm stating this wrong. The intent is you'll get the comments and the straw polls, and effectively the response to the comments should be reflected in the next turn of the draft, the next round of edits, and that's. I realize that's not the same as a direct response to you made this comment, this is how we reacted, but it should be reflected in the next draft is the intent.
Yeah, so I think for the term sheets that the task force is recommending that it would be this informal comment period where responses to comments are not required. We will make sure that the final recommendations makes it clear whether the comment periods on the draft standards would have some sort of response to comments required to them, whether that might be a summary or something else. So we'll make sure that that is clear in the final recommendations. All right. So next question. And sorry, we just got a few in, so give me a moment here. Hey, Todd, you talked about the comment period with the board requesting comments on the final recommendations ahead of February. Could you clarify a little bit more? The question is, what kind of feedback will you be seeking during that time period and that comment period, which I know is not going to be the task force specifically requesting comments. So could you just touch on that a little bit more?
Well, so it is feedback directly to the board. I would hope it would be. Ideally, it's going to be. We're very supportive of what Greg has proposed here. I realize that may not be reality, but I think that is an opportunity to get some direct feedback to the board. One, if there are things that you appreciate that were proposed, but if you have concerns about particular parts of the proposal, that's also an avenue to raise a concern and get it on the board's radar as they are taking action. I think that's the real intent, is to get some direct feedback to the board on what industry thinks about this recommendation.
Thanks for that, Todd. Greg, did you have something to add?
No. Well, I guess I agree with what Todd said on that, but this is an opportunity as well. And ideally, if you do support it, maybe some advice to the board on implementation or next steps, something like that.
Okay.
That would be a good time to voice some ideas around how you see implementation of this going forward. So that would be another opportunity right there to inform the board, because if the board accepts these recommendations, their next step is going to be, how are we going to handle this implementation? And we'll have to take that next step at that point.
Great, thank you both. All right, so next question. What is the task force currently thinking around who would create the first draft of a standard? Would that be NERC, a drafting team, or where's the task force landing on that?
Todd, I'll take a stab real quick and then you can chime in. So we're going to have a good term sheet. This term sheet is going to be designed to lead the first draft of that standard. And NERC staff is going to be developing that first draft. Again, you got to think of it as we want to get the project team going without a blank page. So the intent is to use the AI developed tools to take that take that term sheet and turn it into a draft 0, of which NERC staff will vet it, will look at it, possibly have some SMEs look at it. Again, implementation points are here, but the first draft has got to start with NERC staff vetting it from the output of that term sheet. And we would like to use that AI tool. That doesn't mean AI is going to draft it. NERC staff has got to be the ones looking at it and making sure that it is a good first draft. Then we hand that over to the project team, and they're not starting from a blank page like we do today. So that's the intent behind draft 0 and who would write that. Todd, anything different from you on that?
I think you said it quite well.
And so just elaborating on that a little bit, at what point would you expect SMEs to be involved in reviewing the draft?
Well, that will be a point that the risk subcommittee would be engaged in. Ideally, it's going to be right after that first draft 0 is put together. I mean, that will be the point. As soon as you've got something for a team to look at, that's when you bring in the SMEs right there.
Great, thank you. We've got time for another couple questions here. The next one, has NERC or the task force considered having comments or balloting times based on risk? So, potentially having a longer time frame for larger entities if they have a higher risk of with that particular standard, or has that been a consideration at all by the task force?
So, Kristen, I'm sorry, you went out a little bit. I didn't hear all of that question.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
Let me get a little bit closer to the mic here. So has the task force considered having comment periods or balloting either, potentially extended based on risk? So perhaps a longer response time for large entities or critical entities, for example.
So we have not put timeframes around any of these. We've got expectations of what we hope will move things along. It's going to be in the drafting development phase of it, though. We hope to get all of those comments, all of the discussions in the drafting phase. So if a drafting team feels like industry needs a little bit longer. You know, that we want them to have that flexibility. We don't want them to just have a set time. We certainly want it to be shorter if it can be shorter. But the intent is not necessarily to give time in the balloting phase, if I heard that right, but more in the development of the standard phase. Let's get the standard right in the development phase and let the ballot be just a ballot, yes or no. And we're hoping that can, you know, we can get down that path to where all of this discussion, whether it needs 30 days, 60 days, you know, we're trying to get it into a efficient timeline here. But the point has got to be, if industry needs more time, we probably need a workshop or a technical conference somewhere along the way. And I think the development team and have that ability to do something like that to help bring everything together in the time period that we're shooting for. Todd, anything different?
No, I think that's right. I think there are other tools in the toolbox, and as opposed to comment periods, maybe the workshop is something we don't need to forget about. And it's a valuable tool we need to make sure we're using properly, as opposed to extending out comment periods, I think.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, next question, and this may be more in the implementation stage, but does the task force have any thoughts around if someone volunteers for the SME pool, would you expect that they could sub out for another person at their entity if there is a potential availability issue?
I'll hit this one off the cuff. This is just my thought. We do need to work through kind of more governance around the SME pool. But my thought would be the reason we've got that pool is for us to be able to move quickly. And so you think in terms of they're pre-qualified to be in the pool. And so to the extent the second individual at your company is already in the pool, there's probably not a problem with that. I would think the process is going to be, we're going to go to a group of SMEs with a particular expertise. They're in the pool, find out which ones are available, and then they become the pool of people that you pick from. Having to go through a qualification process for yet another person at that point, we're trying to avoid. So I don't know if that helps. I think if you've got that concern, you might be better off to go ahead and get multiple people in the pool.
Thanks, Todd. And we are at time now, so certainly feel free, if anybody has more questions, feel free to email them to mspp@nerc.net. We will make sure that the task force receives them, and certainly we hope you'll join the various things coming up in January, and look forward to any engagement between now and then, and look forward to posting the final recommendations. Greg and Todd, any final words now that we're a minute over? Any final words you'd like to make?
Just thank you, everybody, for calling in and giving us your feedback. Looked for the revised recommendations to come out, and certainly open to any thoughts or comments anybody has. Todd?
Just ditto. Thanks for the industry engagement has been helpful throughout this entire process, and so I appreciate that, and I'd ask for you to just continue your engagement. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Happy holidays, and that does conclude today's webinar.